out tonight. I know many of you, and for those of you who don't know me, I am Denise George. I'm the interim president at Sharon Hospital. I've been there for 10 months. It's been quite a journey and very, very enjoyable for me to be here. And so I do thank you for coming out tonight. The way we're going to structure the agenda is I'm going to do the update on Sharon Hospital. Carrie Eaton from HealthQuest was going to do the new man's update. If she doesn't make it, I'll do it. And then I will introduce the independent monitor, Scott Clay, and his team, who is here tonight. So with that, we'll get started. One of the things that would be helpful, I think, to get through the agenda tonight, because I know many of you do also want to hear from the independent monitor and have questions, is to try to hold the questions till the end if possible. So that would be great. So this is bittersweet for me. As I said, I've been here for 10 months. And all along, our intention was to hire a full-time president for Sharon Hospital. And I am happy to report that Mark Herco, Dr. Mark Herco, is the incoming president. He actually started Monday. Mark, where are you? Oh, there you are. Please stand up, Mark. So Mark is going to be a wonderful addition for Sharon. First of all, he is a physician. He has physician leadership background as well as administrative background. And so he has quite a bit of experience. He's been in HealthQuest for a few years running our surgical programs, specialty programs, also very involved in our surgical residency and our residency programs in general. Before that, he was a vascular surgeon, well, he still is. He keeps looking at my veins, and I say no. So I have dark stockings on. Okay. Anyway, and so he's been around the block. He's worked in New Jersey. He's worked at Bay State. So I do trust that you'll be in good hands. So over the next 2 months, I'll still be around. I'm going to hand off to Mark. We're going to work together, and I certainly look forward to introducing many of you that I've gotten to know to Mark. So we'll be setting up those meetings and events. So we will have some events to introduce Mark. So glad to hear Mark.
Thank you.
So just a couple of things. The most important thing that I do as a president is quality and safety. And the board at Sharon spends a lot of time on quality and safety as well. And I am really happy to report that we continue to be A-rated by Leapfrog, which is an organization that rates safety of hospitals. And, that doesn't happen by accident. That happens very intentionally. And as you can see here, we're really doing better than the nation in many aspects, including infections, surgeries, preventing errors, and just in general safety of our patients when they come to the hospital. In terms of other quality metrics that we look at, mortality ratio is on the right. We are better than 90% of the hospitals in the country in mortality ratio. Again, with mortality, lower is better, okay? We all want to still be here. But we also look at other metrics, whether it's complication ratios or other events that happen in the hospital. And we do a really good job at Sharon. And that is really the devoted medical staff and staff in the hospital that keep our patients safe and produce the quality. Sorry. Thought I turned that off. So what else is going on at the hospital? So a couple of things I'd like to point out. I don't know if you can see numbers in the back, but what this slide is really showing, and I will tell you this pointer is pretty wimpy, so I'm not able to get it to work. But basically, we're seeing really growth at the hospital is in some of these surgical areas, whether it's pain management, orthopedic surgery, also in cardiology and wound care and radiology. And there's a little bit of a theme here. With the exception of orthopedics, those are all outpatient. procedures or services that we provide. So that is a true growth area. Sharon's not unique, that's happening across the country. We're seeing declining inpatients, and we're seeing a increasing demand for outpatient services. Many services have moved to the outpatient arena. They can be provided safely there. And quite frankly, that's all the insurance companies will pay for. What we did see a slight decline in the number of patients coming to our emergency room. These numbers are reflecting only January through September. So it's a 9-month run. We do have some new doctors at the hospital. The two on the top are both radiologists. Why is that important? The radiologists these days do a lot more than read tests or interpret studies. They also do procedures. So they do breast biopsies, they do drainages of different organs. So that is some of the work that those docs are doing. On the left is Dr. Dennis Tereb. He's a new general surgeon that has joined the hospital full-time. We're very excited to have him. In addition to his general surgery, he's also ICU and trauma trained. And then the rest of the providers are nurse practitioners in various areas. And I don't know if any of you saw, I think it was in the Washington Post, a big article a couple of weeks ago about what's happening in rural and semi-rural areas, and how, because of the physician shortage and the difficulty in attracting physicians to rural areas in particular, the importance of nurse practitioners and PAs is really, it's mission critical to have those providers in our community to provide care. So we're able to expand some of our services with them. Speaking of services, we've completed our project, which was to expand behavioral health, the inpatient senior behavioral health unit. So we now have 17 beds open. We got approval from the Department of Health, Total First, to use those beds. And it is a growth area for the hospital. It is kind of, again, bittersweet to have this kind of demand, because many of the patients on the unit are elderly and they're exclusively elderly, usually over 55. And there are also patients that have behavioral issues. Some of it's dementia, some of it's other types of depressions, things like that, and we help stabilize those patients. You can see where the patients are coming from. They're coming from certainly, really a lot of towns in Connecticut as well as New York. Maternity. So what's happening in maternity? Yes, we're in business. Again, this is a 9-month run, no pun intended. So year to date, we've delivered 135 babies. That is down from the same period of time in 2018 by about 20%. We are working very aggressively. We've been able to move out some of our travelers because we are training. We've run a nurse residency program. We've also been attempting to recruit additional OB providers to the community. Kind of disappointed we've not been able to make that happen. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we have certainly been trying. We've been running the ad campaign. Many of you are probably aware that Columbia Memorial in Columbia County, Hudson, closed their birthing center. They were doing about 320 deliveries a year and could not sustain it because they could not find physicians or keep physicians. So we did do advertising over there to see if we could attract some patients here. We didn't have too many takers, but we did try. And we've also started, we have a bunch of support groups and outreach for the moms, and so we started a store club. It's really prenatal education. So this is, tele-ICU is, I'm very excited about this. So one of the things being at the hospital now, we are transferring out of our community over 400 patients a year to a higher level of care. And why is that? Some of that is because if you need cardiac surgery, we don't do cardiac surgery. We need brain surgery, obviously we don't do that. So there's certain things we don't do, and quite frankly, we'll never do here. However, there are things that we could do that we're not, because we don't have access to critical care, board-certified, trained physicians. So we are working with a company, and this is a program that's also up and running in Putnam Hospital and at Northern Dutchess. And basically how it works is that on a 24/7 basis, there are critical care physicians they're actually down in New York City. I think some of our staff went down and saw what we call the war room down there. And they're watching our patients. They're assessing our patients. They're helping to admit our patients, assess our patients. They have continuous access to ventilator settings, blood pressures, lab values, diagnostic studies, and they can talk to the patient. They can also talk to the nursing staff and the physicians as well. So we still have physicians taking care of patients in ICU, but we will also be augmenting that with, again, board-certified intensive care physicians. And this will roll out sometime in mid-January. And the goal here is to keep some more patients local that we can manage here with the help of these physicians. So, another thing that happened on October 1st is we were notified that we are now designated rural. That's new. Prior to this, we still have another designation, which is called sole community provider. So we're still trying to wrap our brain around what this really means, and we also are working with the Connecticut Hospital Association as well. But we do believe that having this rural designation will really open us up for some new types of programs and services, certainly some grants, and perhaps being able to recruit physicians and offer loan forgiveness. So those are the things that we're starting to explore now. We're working with, as I said, the Connecticut Hospital Association, some other regulatory folks, and obviously Connecticut, because we have to work with the Connecticut DPH, Department of Health, to understand what their requirements are. But this is a federal designation, okay? So you got federal government, CMS, all those regulations. Now we also have Connecticut. So we're still working through it, and hopefully at the next forum we'll be able to, and we're working with our board and with other stakeholders to see what we can roll out here in terms of capitalizing on this new designation. We continue to invest in our employees. Last time I was here, we talked about, we did a pretty big market adjustment. That's code word for salary increases for our employees. And we've been doing really well retaining. We actually have very good retention with our employees. We've added, actually I apologize, that number is wrong. We actually added 15 staff members because of the expansion in senior behavioral health. And the numbers listed below, these are numbers that we get from the Connecticut Hospital Association, pointing out our payroll is about $22 million, and the economic impact that the hospital has on our service area, on the community. They come up with a number. Somebody smarter than me calculates that, so it's 45 million-ish. So really good stuff happening with our employees. We did an employee engagement survey. They are very happy to work at the hospital, and I think that shows when we come to the hospital. So a couple of things we continue to work on: the ever-popular physician recruitment, which I always think is number one priority. We are working with, because of the new Mission Act, we're working to see what we can do for our local veterans in terms of expanding services to them. Strengthen the fundamentals. This is continue to work on improving quality, improving the patient experience, and improving the work environment for our employees, and continuing to work on financial viability. And we did start a career we're working with one of the local high schools to start a career shadowing program. And that was Maria Horn's idea. She floated that, and it's a great idea. When you came in, there was a community chronicle. It's our second edition of that. Would like to point out that, excuse me, anybody who wants to get in touch with anybody in the hospital, myself, or even a board member, we did establish a Sharon Hospital at newvancehealth.org website, email, excuse me, to reach us. In terms of our community health and assessment, so we are in the throes of looking at developing our plan for 2020. So what this is we take a look and we work with various groups as well as surveys that have been done of our service area, folks in our service area, identifying what they feel are their health issues, what they feel. And lo and behold, the ever popular chronic diseases are an issue, we all know that, especially as we age, and behavioral health and substance use, in particular opioid use. So we're still working with our various groups to put together a plan that we will then implement starting in, I believe it's February or March. Community benefit, a couple of things. We have a lot of programs going on to offer to folks, whether it's support groups, educational lectures, those types of things. We served 3,400 people in 2018. And in terms of charity care and subsidized services, this was an issue I know that's come up in the past. And basically, this is what we do report in our 990s, in the 2018 990s. And it's really looking at the basically charity care, subsidized services, in particular our ER. We do subsidize our emergency room, and the loss from taking care of either patients that have no insurance or have actually Medicaid insurance. And that's my report. Oh, Carrie's here. So I'm going to invite Carrie Eaton to come up, and she's the Chief Operating Officer for New Vance. She's going to give us a very brief update on New Vance, and after that we will ask Scott Clay to come up, who is the independent monitor, to report.
I snuck in anywhere games. So, good evening. Thank you everybody for being here. As Denise said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for New Vance Health. I was counting on my fingers while Denise was talking, and New Vance Health is 8 months old. So we're 1 short. We're 1 month short of actually the time it takes to deliver a baby. So we are really brand new. We're not even in our infancy, and so I think. But I want to give you an update of kind of why we did this and where we are so far. But we'll just take a couple of minutes, and we'll get to the meat of the evening. You know, we did it because it made sense from a geographic perspective. You might remember, I think we've talked about this before with many of you, is that when we lined up the market that Western Connecticut Health Network served and the market that HealthQuest served, they literally lined up side by side with almost no overlap. So it made a lot of sense for us to partner together to see how it is that we could serve healthcare into the larger region and what kind of opportunities we could have to share resources to make healthcare stronger in the areas that we serve. You can see there are 7 hospitals in our healthcare system now. 4 came from Legacy HealthQuest and 3 came from Western Connecticut Health Network. We spent some time thinking about who we strive and endeavor to be as a health system, what we want our identity to be known as. New Vance, the name actually comes from new and advanced, with this idea that we want to be innovative and thoughtful about how we approach healthcare in the future and realize the solutions of the old might not fit the needs of the future. And so we're trying to be intentional about that as we go forward as an organization. We selected our reason for being, and I'm not going to read it all to you in a slide, but we really want to think about what might feel impossible and consider providing it and making sure that our communities have the health care that they need, even when it seems beyond our reach. Personal care, connected care. We would like to be agile, meaning we'd like to be able to be nimble and be able to change quickly. Healthcare is not exactly known for being nimble, so we'd like to kind of pursue that impossibleness. and we would like to be creative or imaginative. So these are all part of the values that we would like to endeavor to strive to be as Nuvance Health. As you can imagine, when you're bringing together two different health systems to become a new health system, this is a process and not a light switch or an event. So that we are really working intentionally to adopt behaviors and ways of organizing ourselves that allow these values to enable our organization. What have we done so far? This is just a little bit of a time map in our first 8 months. You can see in April we completed our, the integration began. It was April 1st actually was our very first day. We had our inaugural board meeting later that month. In May, we began to take our leadership team and our operational teams and sitting them around tables together to look at how it was that we delivered services across our healthcare system, and where were the opportunities for synergies, learning from one another, and so forth. And that work actually continues. I literally came from that sort of meeting on my way out before I was here. In June and July, we identified priority service lines for us as an organization. A service line is just a way of identifying, for example, surgical care. Instead of having a way of doing surgery in Sharon, and a different way in Poughkeepsie, and a different way in Rhinebeck, and another way in Norwalk, and another way in Danbury, we want to think about what is best practice surgical care that we can provide, and how do we make sure that no matter where you are in the Nuvance Health System, that we're providing a level of care and a standard of care that you can depend on for excellence at Nuvance Health. So service lines are really care organized around a specialty, so surgery or neuroscience or oncology, for example. So we are in the process of standing up those service lines, identifying what is best practice, where are the needs, what are the needs, and how can we together take resources in our healthcare system to meet those needs along the continuum. One of the ways that we had begun to do that in Sharon prior to the integration was, for example, with cardiology. We have a very well-developed cardiology service line in Legacy Health Quest, and when we began working in Sharon, cardiology came to Sharon as part of a service line to be able to deliver services here and to work together across the continuum. So that's what a service line is. We also developed, since April, an aligned quality infrastructure. We actually have a way of looking at quality across our entire system, have developed a structure for that, a way of working with clinicians to make sure that we're continuing to strive to achieve top decile performance in all we do relative to quality and clinical care. In August, you might have noticed, we began to really push out our brand launch, and you should have heard us talking about our identity as Nuvance. Over time, you will begin to see Western Connecticut Health Network signs go away and HealthQuest signs go away and be placed with Nuvance. Our hospitals and our offices will retain their local name. We still have Sharon Hospital and Putnam Hospital and Norwalk Hospital and Danbury Hospital and so forth, but they are all under the umbrella of Nuvance Health. So that's our brand, the brand, and I talked to you about the values and characteristics of our brand before. In October, we began having our independent monitor visits as part of the Connecticut settlement agreement to integrate as Nuvance Health. There were conditions that the state of Connecticut worked with us to adopt, and then we're accountable for meeting those conditions, and there's an independent monitor who evaluates whether or not we're meeting the intentions and the requirements of that agreement. You're going to hear a little later from them. And then in November, we held our first all boards meeting, which means the boards of each individual hospital and the parent Nuvance Health Board all met together for a meeting, and that will be something that we do on a regular basis. So from an integration perspective, these are the things that we're working on right now. I mentioned this already, best practices. We are a healthcare delivery system, so we're focusing on healthcare delivery and we're leading with quality. And so what does quality healthcare look like, and how can we deliver that across our system? Literally every single one of our hospitals and healthcare systems does something wonderful and has something to teach or for the rest of us to learn from. So we are trying to harvest the best practices and the best experiences from each entity within our healthcare system and spread that knowledge so that we can share it with all the communities that we serve. And we're having a lot of fun doing that. One of the values of integration, besides learning from one another, bringing those best practices to other communities, is what we think we're able to do because of our size and scale. We've already, Denise talked about one of her top priority was always physician recruitment and having physician talent in the communities that we serve. Being a larger organization has allowed us to attract a caliber of physician talent that we would not have been able to attract if we didn't have this large scale. There are certain specialties that require a very large population in order to be able to deliver services. There has to be a sizable population. So often you have to go to places like New York City or large cities for that kind of care. We're now big enough in covering doubling our size that we've been able to attract specialists in reconstructive cancer and other areas that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to attract. We also have expanded physician teaching across our healthcare system, and being a teaching organization also allows you to attract providers to your communities that you might not otherwise be able to attract, because you become teaching organizations are known to be learning, growing organization, kind of on the cutting edge, and everybody wants to be working in healthcare settings that have those characteristics. Our larger size allows us to leverage resources to be able to bring technologies and capabilities to our healthcare system that we might not otherwise be able to do. So really, some of our size and scale allows us to do these things. We are bringing our leadership teams together to learn from one another. As I talked about before, it's not just our clinical teams that are coming together, but it's our leadership teams to look at how we can adopt innovation. Just yesterday, I was at a meeting around some amazing technology and innovation around how to solve global health problems that we were talking about. How could we take this particular innovation in administering vaccines and apply it to day-to-day healthcare in the United States? And being a larger healthcare system attracts innovators and specialists to our organization to see whether or not we would be good partners for innovative technologies to be able to deliver services to our healthcare system. So those are some of the benefits that being part of a larger healthcare system allows us to be able to enjoy. And then another thing that's really important to us is we like to retain our talented staff, and sometimes the next position for a talented staff member doesn't happen to be right inside the building that they happen to work in. So we are already getting to see that we have people who are talented leaders who get to go take a position in another one of our entities. So they stay with us in New Advanced Health. We get to keep that talent, but they get to grow within our own organization. And our own Peter Cordeau, who used to be president of Sharon Hospital, is an example of that. He became president at Norwalk Hospital. So we got to keep the talents and capabilities of Peter within our own system instead of losing talent to a different system. So those are just some of the benefits that we're beginning to work on to achieve through this integration. We do have a few folks that are new to us, new faces in our system that have been recently recruited. Dr. Chris LaRock is the new president of our New Advanced Medical Group. So our New Advanced Medical Group is the combined HealthQuest medical practice and the Western Connecticut medical practice combined. And so Dr. Chris LaRock is a very talented physician. I think he's been with us about 3 months, and he now is the president of that entire system. Dr. Paul Wright is a stroke neurologist who has come to lead our neuroscience service line. I talked to you a little bit about service lines before, and he's a talented physician who's responsible for creating that service line and neuroscience expertise and capability across our entire region. Margot Shute is also a surgeon. She's an oncology surgeon, hepatobiliary surgeon, but she was hired to run the oncology service line across all of New Advanced Health and to create capability so that we could serve all the communities where our friends live. And then last but not least, Dr. Jeff Nicastro. He's a talented surgeon, and he came to work and develop our surgical program across all of New Advanced Health. In addition, not listed here, a new provider that's been important to us in our community because we've had a shortage we did hire a new breast surgeon, Dr. Susan Boble, who joined us in October, came to us from Mount Sinai, very well regarded with an international expertise, and is known for her expertise in breast surgery. We would not have been able to recruit somebody of these people of this caliber if we had not been New Vance Health, because we wouldn't have, we just wouldn't have had the depth and breadth of a healthcare delivery system that they were looking for to share their skill sets and capabilities. So we really think it's exciting that being part of New Vance Health allows us to attract this kind of talent, and we continue to get calls from providers that want to work with us now or hearing good things about New Vance Health and what it is that we're doing across our healthcare system. So that was my last slide, and not least, I think the next folks up with that are our independent monitors. So thank you very much.
So we're going to allow Scott Clay to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about himself before he gets started with his report. But as Kerry had mentioned, and I'm sure you're all aware that because of the integration, we have a requirement with the Connecticut Department of Health to fulfill certain obligations. And so as part of that, we were also independent monitor was engaged across all of Connecticut hospitals to make sure that we are fulfilling our obligations in that agreement. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. Not that it's a competition, but I have to say the turnout here is better than we typically see in much larger communities. So it's not a surprise to us. We knew that you're an active community and you care a lot about this hospital. So we did expect a nice crowd here tonight. Before I start, let me just say that as I've told some members of the community already, I've worked with small rural hospitals my whole career in strategic business planning for healthcare. And I'm well aware of the importance that hospitals have to small rural communities. They really have an outsized impact to communities like this, not only in delivering the direct services that they provide, but also being a kind of convener for other health maintenance issues, and not least of which is the economic benefit they have in the community. So hospitals are a critical aspect of smaller communities, even more so than they are in larger towns. Let me start by just saying a little bit about, while we're here, as Lee said, what is an independent monitor? The independent monitor is, our purpose is strictly to focus on these 25 conditions that the Office of Health Strategy, OHS, has placed on New Vance for the merger that occurred here between HealthWest and Western Connecticut Health Network. And so that's really our focus, and I'll get into more detail in a minute about that. But, I wanted to introduce, in addition to myself, my colleague Dwight Tarwater is here. While I'm kind of leading things on the ground here, Dwight's with me, managing the project along the way. We have other team members that are not here tonight with our firm. David McMillan, who leads our strategy and integration practice for the firm, is part of our team. And we also have our chief compliance officer and the principal that leads our compliance practices is a member of our team as well. So what I want to talk about tonight is just in this first meeting, remember this is the first of city annual meetings we'll be having. Spend a little more time in this meeting, providing a little bit of introduction about ourselves, what our roles, what our role is, and then getting into our report for this semi-annual period. First of all, to talk about our firm a little bit. We were chosen as the independent monitor here, PYA is we're a national healthcare consulting and accounting firm. Been in business for 35 years. According to one of the main industry publications, Modern Healthcare, we consistently rank as one of the top 20 healthcare consulting firms in the country. If you're counting healthcare consulting firms that are independently owned, not owned by other investors, we're in the top 10. We do about 5,000 healthcare projects a year. You have clients in all 50 states. We offer a wide range of services. And one of the things that we kind of highlighted here is that although 80% of our business is in healthcare consulting, we are structured as an accounting firm because we have audit services as well. And I point that out because the AICPA, which provides professional standards for auditors, has one of the most stringent independent set of standards in the industry. And so we adhere to those independent standards in any kind of work that we do, including healthcare consulting projects like this. So we wanted to point that out. You can kind of see the list of types of services that we do. A lot of them really require, independent-oriented services, including compliance. We do a lot of compliance work. We do a lot of fair market value work for healthcare. These are all healthcare services, by the way, litigation support and things like that. But specifically as it relates to this type, this engagement, we do a lot of regulatory work. Whether it's actually, working on CONs, doing expert testimony in CON hearings. We worked for many states attorneys general to review mergers and acquisitions, as well as provide oversight such as this, whether it's an independent review organization for corporate integrity agreements or monitor service like this for a CON. So we have a broad range of experience, and so we know that the process that OHS used to choose this was to get a list of providers, get a list of consulting firms from Nuvance, and then rank those. And so I think based on the experience that we have, they chose us as the consultant for this engagement. So what is our role here? And our role is very specifically defined in this agreed settlement, which is the result of the CON application. It's the agreed settlement between Office of Health Strategy and Nuvance about what's required of Nuvance to maintain during at least a 5-year period for most of these conditions. So we report to the Office of Health Strategy. We talk with them frequently, meet with them when we're in the state. But we are retained at the sole expense of Nuvance Health, just like an independent auditor is, just like the primary accreditation agency for healthcare, Joint Commission is. So it's not an unusual circumstance for that to occur. And our role is specifically to monitor Nuvance's compliance with these 25 conditions that are spelled out very specifically in the agreed settlement from the CON. And I hate to disappoint some of you, but that's strictly our role. And we don't review things outside of the 25 conditions or anything that's really required of us from OHS. So if you have questions about the history of Nuvance, its predecessors, or what's happening in other aspects, I'll pass the mic to someone else, because really all we're looking at are the things that we're authorized to review. The process is structured over a 5-year period, up to a 5-year period. It could, based on OHS's decision, it could rescind it after year 3. So that's an overview of our responsibilities. When we're doing monitoring services like this, and we are kind of serving as an independent third party, working with both a regulatory agency such as OHS and providers such as Nuvance, we find that they're speaking different languages in many cases, and they come from 2 different worlds, and they operate in very different ways. And we see part of our role is to help provide clarity between those 2 types of organizations. And in this case, it involves a third participant, which is you, the community stakeholders. And so, once again, we understand the complexities of healthcare, and at the same time, we are not. We have the benefit of not having to live it in a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's hard for the operators to step out and simplify the complexity of what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. We kind of have the benefit of being a little bit further at a 30,000-foot level. Sometimes it's easier for us to bridge that gap. So really, we see our role as helping to facilitate the communication between the parties, and at the same time, make sure that we're, that we're monitoring the compliance. And
is there any New York State component to this process at all?
There isn't, and also just to follow up on Denise's request, if we could just hold the questions to the end, but the answer is no to that. But we'll have a full Q&A session at the end here. But no, we are engaged by the Connecticut Office of Health Strategy for Sharon Hospital, the Danbury Hospital, and for Norwalk Hospital, and those are the only 3 hospitals that we're looking at. So our duties, what we're required to do include conducting on-site visits to the hospitals on a semi-annual basis, and then prepare a report on a semi-annual basis. We meet with representatives of the local communities at least annually, and then we, of course, participate in these public forums, which will occur, as I mentioned, on a semi-annual basis as well. And then, if we do find that Advance is substantially out of compliance for any of the areas, it's our role to notify OHS in advance and make sure that a plan is developed for for compliance and corrective action. So it's pretty straightforward, really, what our roles and responsibilities are here. We operate on a semi-annual basis, really. I mean, our reports come out on a semi-annual basis, and so that's kind of our cycle over 5 years. So if we look at this first semi-annual period, as we talked, as you mentioned earlier, day one, when the clock started to tick was April 1st, and that's when the merger closed and transaction occurred. We started in May, and we spent the month of June pretty much, reviewing background materials and meeting with OHS and Advance to kind of get more background and understand exactly what OHS is looking for and those types of things. And then before we really put together, started drafting our report and our findings, we spent a good bit of time in July and August in trying to really clarify what the meaning of the requirements were. Because you can read the language, and even though it's well written, by attorneys and it's pretty clear from a regulatory standpoint, there's still a lot of interpretation that need to be made as to how do we interpret compliance? How do we take this condition and determine if it is compliant or not? And so we developed a table of what we call evidence of compliance, and where we kind of broke down in more detail than the conditions do what would be required for Advance to be compliant with that condition. And we worked over it with OHS to make sure that yes, this is what they intended when they wrote the conditions, and we worked with Advance to say to understand what are the implications for their systems and ability to report and things like that, so that we got everybody on the same page about this is, so that there were going to be no surprises if this is what it's going to take to be compliant. So once we had that, we were able to kind of go full bore into reviewing materials and conducting our research to develop our report. We did conduct site visits in October. And submitted the report that same month. Part of our role is to meet with community representatives, and that's kind of a hard thing. There was no guidance as to what is the definition of community representatives, who would we meet with, and so we thought, in the first round, again, round 1 of 10, we thought the best place to start would be with the community health committees that were already formed. And the reason we thought that is because these are the people who have some background and knowledge as to, they've already kind of looked at what the health needs are in the community from the standpoint of developing the community health needs assessment, and that'd be a good group to start with. Here at Sharon, as we talk to that group, you know, and we learned more about the community, we learned we needed to go beyond that group to, you know, understand the perspectives of the community. So we did talk to a couple of other groups as well in November, and kind of leading up to this public forum. So, well, I'm sure we'll have more discussion about that when we get into the Q&A period, but that's our process. Again, just to make sure that I'm clear about what our scope is, you know, not only are we kind of limited to review of the conditions, but we're also kind of limited at this point to review this time frame. So, you know, we reviewed in this process up to this date, you know, April through September, the first 6 months of after the merger. And because of that, you know, how much changes in 6 months? You know, mostly what we're here to do is to make sure that, you know, we're kind of monitoring changes after the merger, so that so that activities that are not positive for the community don't happen during that time. So so that's kind of our timeline for our first semi-annual review. Now, so what did we look at during this 6-month period? As I mentioned at the top, you know, there are 25 conditions in the REACH settlement, and many of those conditions really don't have requirements until after the first year, because, you know, how much can change and how much can you really monitor change, you know, in shorter than a year's time. Some things you can, but in this case, the conditions that really had issues that we could that were appropriate for this 6-month period, there were 12 conditions that were applicable to the first period. And what we've done here is just try to really boil the language down to kind of little one-line summaries, although they're written in, you know, detailed legalese language of a paragraph longer. So, but what I want to do now is just spend a little bit of time kind of going through each of these with you and telling you how we went about, you know, looking at that. So, the first 2 conditions have to do with do the boards have community representation on the boards? And, you know, condition number 1 relates to Danbury Rural Hospital. Condition number 2 relates to Sharon Hospital. The differences are, in Sharon itself, the requirement was that at least 12 members were community representatives, whereas at Danbury Norwalk, they only needed to have 1. So, what do we do there? Well, so we, you know, first of all, we got the board membership listing, the bios, the description of how those board members were selected, and we got the bylaws for the board, so that we could understand not only were these in fact members of the community, was the selection process kind of consistent with what we see for national standards of an appropriate way to select board members, and are they based on the bylaws, are they able to participate in a way that's consistent with you know, other voting members of the board? And so based on all of those, that's what we looked at for the board member participation piece. Condition number 4 has to do with just ensuring that the hospitals have culturally and linguistically appropriate services, you know, for the local residents, and so that has a lot to do with translation activities. You know, do they have written materials? Do they have translation services available? Do they, you know, are there significant populations from different cultures that they need to accommodate in ways that are, you know, that are different than the standard approaches? And what we did there was we, you know, reviewed the policies, and we also, during our site visits, sat down with people that manage those programs and kind of walked through with them exactly what they did, asked questions about how they dealt with certain, you know, circumstances, you know, let them kind of demonstrate to us how they responded to those, you know, those needs. And then finally, on that one, we know that the Joint Commission, which is the accreditation agency for hospitals in the United States, also reviews those very same standards. There's a national set of standards for this, and so in fact, Sharon Hospital had recently been accredited by the Joint Commission, who looked at these very same things. So we looked at the Joint Commission results as well to make sure, you know, and they passed you know, the Joint Commission's test on that one as well. Number 5 is maintaining adherence to current charity care and indigent care policies. And what we did on that one was, the first test is, have they changed the policy since they merged? And so we looked to make sure that the policy that was posted publicly on the website is the same policy that was in place before the merger. And then then we also sat down with the financial staff at Sharon Hospital and the other hospitals to understand how they implemented that policy in terms of understanding, what the thresholds are for charity care, what the process is for, ensuring that patients are aware of those policies and providing that opportunity to take advantage of charity care. And so those are all fine from a process standpoint. From a numbers standpoint, we did get an update on charity care, provision of charity care services in terms of the number of applicants, the number of applicants who receive charity care, and the total dollar amount that we'll go over with you a little bit. Well, I mean, I can tell you it's because I know there have been a lot of questions about the charity care amounts, and so in looking at fiscal year, and so what we looked at was, again, remember our review period is from prior to April 2019 through September, and so we were looking at what changed in fiscal year 19 basically for fiscal year 18, and what we found was that the number of charity care applicants and the number of charity care applicants approved and the dollar amount of charity care provided was much higher than it was in fiscal year 18, and in fact was even higher than it was in fiscal year 17. So we felt, so we'll kind of get to our results later, but that's what we looked at. Number 6 is a little bit of a different question about charity care, and that is, OHS wants to know if Nuvance changes their charity care policies, they want to know about it. They want to get notification directly, and they want Nuvance to notify them explicitly about that. So that's just, did they provide advance written notice to OHS? Now it's easy to check. Number 9 is really just filing documents, which was easy to check, just to see if they actually filed those documents. 10, 11, and 12, that's us, the independent monitor. Clearly that happened. We did make our on-site visits, and I talked about the meetings with community representatives a few minutes ago. Number 17 is also just another, submit data to the state, and we were able to demonstrate that was on the portal, and that was there. Number 18 is the big one here. Obviously, it's the it's the condition around obstetric services, and the way that the state decided to monitor this one was they really put it in terms of physicians, OBGYNs, and so I'm not going to remember the exact wording here. I can look it up and we can read it to you if you'd like, but it's essentially that that Nuvance will use commercially reasonable efforts to ensure that there are appropriate number of physicians, OBGYNs in the community to provide quality services that are consistent with community needs, essentially. And then specifically in fiscal year 2020, that Nuvance is responsible for ensuring that there are at least 2 full-time equivalent OBGYNs in the community. And so, there we reviewed the volume of deliveries at the hospital. We reviewed the medical staff rosters. We reviewed the call schedule for maternity to see who was on call, 24/7 for maternity. 3 doctors are on call. We also looked at just the physicians who are currently available in the community, and so we know there's 1 full-time physician employed by by Sharon Hospital, and that there's another private practice group which provides office coverage in the community as well. So. And then 19 is the final condition that's really relevant for this period is that the state is developing this health information exchange where they can collect information from hospitals around the state to be able to create kind of a central database so they can do research on the effectiveness of outcomes and improve and try to on a statewide basis improve the effectiveness of that. So there's a condition that Nuvance develops that contract with them. So those were the conditions. I'm sure you all have lots of questions. I'm almost done with this. So these are the results of our findings. With one exception and one footnote, we did find that during the 6-month period for the conditions that we reviewed, that Nuvance was compliant with the conditions. The one exception is condition number 6, which is the condition around whether Nuvance provided OHS with advance notice about changing their charity care policy. What happened was, first of all, it didn't affect Sharon Hospital. This was for Danbury and Norwalk hospitals. What happens is that for those hospitals, Nuvance has automatic updates on an annual basis that change based on federal poverty guidelines. And so, it basically just updates the policy to be consistent with the newly revised poverty guidelines. And so when we were actually meeting with Nuvance about these conditions, they realized that policy had kind of automatically updated and they hadn't notified OHS. And so they immediately got the notification out to OHS. So, but again, that didn't affect Sharon Hospital. And so when we saw that the policy had been updated, we reviewed it to make sure that it met the condition that, if there is a change in charity care, that it's at least as beneficial and generous as previous policy, and it was. So that's our kind of note on that particular condition. The other one that I said that there's a footnote is that as far as contracting with the Health Information Exchange, the OHS doesn't have it ready yet. So they waived that requirement since they didn't have a Health Information Exchange to contract with yet. So those are our findings for this go around, and our next steps here are after this, then we roll into our next really 6-month cycle. So it's starting again with reviewing the compliance. This next cycle, that's 12 out of 25 conditions. 3 of the conditions are really, they're just legal language. They actually don't have any requirements for Nuvance on them. But, so there's another good, 10 new conditions that we have to review in addition to these over the next cycle. So we've got a lot of work to do as more of these conditions kind of roll on the board for us in this next round. And so we intend to, the time for the next cycle is, doing our on-site visits in the spring. In May is the date when we'll be submitting the report, and then the public forum will follow that. We still need to work on schedules, but sometime around June. So that's our next cycle and our next steps in the process. So. Thank you all. You've been great for not interrupting me with questions, because I know that you have many. So let me now stop. And what I'm going to do is, let me just, before we start here, let me just say a couple things. Again, I think I've explained kind of what our role is. It's somewhat limited, and so I'm going to be in a little bit of a box as to what I can and can't comment on, just because our role is somewhat limited. And so. It's, although not apparent to most of you, there will be some of these questions that Nuvance would be better to answer, some that OHS frankly would be better to answer, and I meant to mention this earlier, but I forgot to. Laura Borisek from OHS, who did the meeting in June, called in sick today. I talked to her this afternoon, and she regrets not being able to be here, but she didn't want to spread her virus at the office, and she didn't want to spread it here either. So. We don't have an OHS official here, so we'll do the best that we can to field these questions. And some of them may be questions that OHS could only answer, so we'll kind of make sure that we get back to them on that. So, go.
The 25 points that you are focusing on.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm going to pass the microphone around. I'm John Nelson. I'm with the Public Affairs team of Nuvance Health. If you could introduce yourself, please, and then ask your question.
Hi, my name is Pari Hecht, and I am a new resident of Sharon as of September. The 25 points that you're focusing on, just so that I understand broadly, they're really business and accounting related things. There's nothing healthcare related?
Well, I don't think that's true. I think, for example, the provision of obstetric services and ensuring that, that the hospital has sufficient physicians to do that, that's very much a healthcare.
Are you auditing, though, the actual conducting of the healthcare, giving the the quality assurance of the healthcare?
Good question. No, we don't. We're not doing a quality review of the healthcare delivered. If that's your question, that's right. Yes, I mean it's really it may sound overly simple. It may sound overly simplified, but literally the 12 lines I had up there is all we're at this stage. All we're doing. There are others, but yeah, but that will come into play next time.
But it's mostly business and financial related. Is your accountants?
Well, I'm not an accountant, and I never have been, so yeah, thank you.
You work using accounting standards.
For independence, yes, ma'am.
Hi, Janet Brown, just up the road in Lakewood. My question simply has to do with the 25 conditions. Are they part of the agreement between the two hospital groups, or have they been set by Connecticut Office of Health Strategy?
Yes.
Who came up with these conditions?
So these are conditions that the state Office of Health Strategy developed as conditions upon which they would approve the CON. And so these are conditions that the agreed settlement is the agreed settlement between what is now Nuvance and the Office of Health Strategy. So it was OHS who came up with these conditions.
Sharon, what does it mean substantially out of compliance? How do you discuss?
Well, pretty much if there's anything out of compliance, like the one I mentioned earlier, where they didn't realize that they needed to send that policy in. Well, we reported, and we worked with Nuvance to make sure that there was corrective action taken. So it really is. It's anything that is notably out of compliance. So,
Okay, so you work with them to comply. You oversee that they do comply.
yes, we would work with them to develop a corrective action plan. That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Do you work that and make sure it's carried out?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Any other questions?
We're not supposed to ask our substantive questions of you, we're supposed to ask.
Oh, no, you can ask them. Yeah, we'll go with her first, and then go ahead.
I shall ask my regular 2 substantive questions because since we have collective leadership, I think I need to continue to pursue these.
Well, and by the way, and let me clarify before you say that. Yes, actually, what our intention was here was, and the reason we did this all at the end is because we will all answer your questions. Whoever the question is appropriate for, that person will jump up and answer it. So.
All right. At every one of these public meetings, I have raised 3 questions. One of them you've corrected. Some of us have been concerned about safety issues, and you're working on it and you're making progress. So I'm not going to ask about that. The 2 concerns that remain substantial, and this has to do with organizing the care so that it works. We're concerned about tick-borne diseases, including Lyme disease, on the one hand, and we're concerned about the amount of pre-diabetes and diabetes that's abroad in the land, which confuses all the other treatments and cases. It's like an underlying condition that you have to worry about. And for years we've been asking to have a specialist available. That doesn't mean on-site, and it doesn't mean seeing patients every day. It means someone available to help the primary care physicians throughout the service area and the nurses and the practitioners so that we get a better handle on diabetes, and therefore all the other treatments will be perhaps more manageable.
I'm going to hand the mic over to someone from Sharon Hospital to answer the question. So, there we go. Get the doctor in on this one. Here we go.
As I get my hands on this. In regards to, actually both questions, since they're both clinically oriented, a community health assessment, needs assessment has been performed. And chronic diseases, including prediabetes, diabetes, actually were mentioned as areas that we needed to work on. So those are areas that we work with the community with outreach programs to actually help better educate the community on where we need to be and to better offer services to help the community with plans and treatment options that may help us in the long run. In regards to infectious disease or acquired diseases, maybe with tick-borne disease, that really wasn't mentioned per se, but we know, just mentioned, we had a staff meeting this morning, which that was the lecture that was brought up in regards to treatment options.
It's an epidemic in
Yes.
this area.
So those definitely are issues that are being looked at and will be addressed appropriately. But definitely the chronic diseases were things that were definitely mentioned in the needs assessment.
Among the ideas that you might want to consider in those consultations is that there might be citizens available to consult with you on that as a kind of work group. You have some of the finest physicians available for consultation, even on the hospital. Dr. Kenneth Ligner, who lives in Millerton and has his practice, he's on your list. This man could be available
He gave us,
as a consultant.
sure, definitely, sorry. He actually gave us our lecture this morning. So, I mean, it's more apropos, very apropos. So we definitely are looking into it. It was, by happen chance, he was there, so definitely.
Any other questions? Sorry, Denise, did we cut you off? Okay. Yeah.
I'm Jill Drew from Sharon, and my question sort of follows on what you were addressing. First of all, thank you, Denise, for being so open and willing to meet with us. And you've just been terrific, and I'm really pleased that you've been able to hire Dr. Herco, but we're sorry to see you go here. And I do appreciate that you've now established a general email address for members of the public to contact the administration of the hospital about newly arising issues or things that people don't understand. So that's also helpful. I do know that before HealthQuest bought Sharon Hospital, there used to be a community advisory board. That was disbanded and in favor of the regular hospital board that's now has 12 members that were selected as being members of the community. I'd be very interested in talking to you, Dr. Herco, about maybe trying to reestablish a community advisory board. That had our elected officials on it, including our first selectman and our state senator and our state representative, and other members of the community, so that there was like an ongoing dialogue. They met every quarter, and so some of the things that have happened in the last couple of years, such as the debacle last summer with the potential closing of maternity, I think having this kind of two-way communication could be really, really helpful. I think, as you noted, Mr. Clay, that there's so many people here. I think the town of Sharon and the whole Northwest Corner are very invested in Sharon Hospital. And there are a lot of people here who want to have open communication with members of the hospital. So just thinking about different options besides just an email address. The Sharon Hospital Board doesn't really fill that role. They're an inward-facing group. They are dealing with a lot of confidential patient information, and I'm sure that they're doing a great job. The quality numbers seem to be really good. But the kind of communication that the community, I think, is seeking is not being carried out, even though it might meet the condition of the agreed settlement, because there are 12 members of people who can be defined as community representatives. So I'm just throwing out that question, would you all be open to discussing this establishment of a new community advisory board?
When I was interviewed for the position, people pointedly, even on the board, asked me that question. And I let them know that, our option is our team is always willing to sit down and discuss with the community options and areas that we can work better together. And so I'm willing to work and have our team work with people in the community to help make this work. So,
That's quite answering the question.
Okay.
No, that's not really more specific.
Oh, well, I'm willing to sit down and have meetings to make a decision on what is best for us in regards to how to make this work. There may be options other than community advisor. There may be other options out there. Let's sit in a forum to discuss those.
If anybody wants to be part of that group, see me afterward and we'll set this up.
Sure.
Do you have a list so that they can sign up?
Sure.
Celia Ackerman, Salisbury. To the independent monitor, a little bit following up on what was just said. It showed in your timeline, and you discussed that you talked with, I don't know if that was in person or calls, some were calls, to community members. And I think that's going to be an ongoing part during the time of your service. Will you continue to talk to those same people? And if not, and it's different people, how will you go about finding them, selecting them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just to be a little more specific about what we did this time. So yeah, we started with the community health committee, and then really based on discussions there, discussions that we had in hospital, and we knew that the Safe Sharon Hospital group was an active group that had a lot to say, and so that's one of the groups that we followed up with a telephone call, and the other was Foundation for Community Health here in Sharon, because we know that of course that organization was founded. Its mission is to provide, to use its resources to provide services, healthcare services to the community. They've got a lot to say as well. So those were the two groups that we talked with, and I don't know that I have a scientific way of how we would add to that list. We will make.
What is the community health committee that they're referring to?
Right. So
So we currently have a community health needs committee, and it is comprised of several board members from Sharon Hospital who are community members, as well as different stakeholders in the community. So somebody from the Foundation for Community Health is there, from the schools, from the Federally Qualified Health Center, Hudson River Healthcare, and other stakeholders. And we meet periodically, at least quarterly, we've been meeting, and we talk about different issues. Most of that was focused on basically the findings of the community needs surveys that we do, developing a plan, and then implementing that plan to address some of the needs. So some of the activities that we've done is some around mental health, around education. So that's how we formulated some of our either educational sessions or our support groups or different types of activities that we've done for the community. I will tell you, in terms of chronic disease, big problem, and certainly prediabetes is a big problem, and so one of the activities that the Community Needs Committee has discussed is to really roll out, there was an approved CDC program, so that works with individuals that, and this will be funded by the hospital, that works with individuals to work on pre-diabetes. So it really incorporates healthy eating, exercise, and kind of group therapy, to be honest. And it's been very successful in another hospital I'm very familiar with, where the community has lost hundreds and hundreds of pounds and exercising and doing those things. We've also recognized that much of that obesity, quite frankly, is in some of the areas in New York, particularly with the Latino community. So we also want to work with different groups to fund something to train peer trainers who speak Spanish, because that's a big need as well. So that's a long answer to your question.
Anyone else?
Could I speak to this?
I forgot to give my name. It's Sharon, born in Sharon. Sharon Daniel Kroger. During the health planning era of the 1960s and 70s, you may remember there was always a clarification of a dichotomy between providers on the one hand and consumers on the other. And part of the questions that are coming here, when they're asking you the who's who, when you use the word stakeholder, that doesn't clarify whether or not you're a provider or a consumer. And most sophisticated, educated people today know how to talk to, in professional groups with providers and consumers together in the same room. So I think you might want to strive to accommodate the consumers who are willing to participate and be helpful. Because I think we can be helpful, not just be critical or challenging, but we can pitch in and help.
We would certainly welcome help. That would be great.
Hi, Lydia Moore, Sharon resident. I was just wondering if we could speak a little bit about maternity specifically and physician recruitment in that area. It sounds like it's not currently happening, and I'm wondering what would happen in the next 5 years if one of the current OBs was to have something happen to them. What would the backup plan be to ensure that maternity stays open? Thank you.
Hi, actually we have been actively recruiting for OB in this market since July. We've actually been actively recruiting for this market. We have not had a whole lot of success. As you point out, it's hard to recruit to this market for a lot of specialties. It's one of the things we're grateful for, the larger system, so that we can share resources. But we have been actively recruiting for Sharon in all the places that one would recruit for OB physicians, nationally. We have successfully recruited 4 or 5 physicians, and during the very same time using the very same techniques for the rest of our market. We just haven't been able to get anybody who felt like this was a good fit for them in Sharon. So we have actually actively been trying. I meet with Sharon OB probably communicate with them every week. And meet with them somewhat regularly. We are partnering with how to solve the very question you're asking. What will happen if one of our OB providers leaves the market for whatever reason of their choice? Because we have it is fragile. There are 3 OB providers. 2 of them are part of Sharon OB, which is a local practice, and one of them is part of the employed medical group of Legacy Health Quest. And so we are working with them around what do we do if somebody was to leave. We have come up with a number of scenarios, and some of them have been received with, some of them we think will work, some of them we're not sure will work, and we're actually actively planning right today. Actually probably spent about 2 hours on Sharon OB recruitment today. Probably spent about an hour yesterday, probably about 4 hours last week. So I'm really spending an awful lot of time, as is Dr. Herco, Louise George and others in order to try to make sure that we secure OB services. But I'm not going to be disingenuous by saying it is fragile. It's all explained for people who are wondering why it's fragile. Generally speaking, for an OB practice to be successful, a physician needs about 100 deliveries a year. That's sort of the economics of it, right, for somebody to decide to be an OB provider, 100 to 125. The other thing that they need is good call coverage. So right now, nationally, the models we're seeing for OB are two. One is where there is no call. There's doctors practice only in their office, and some other people deliver in the hospital, and so the OB doctors never have to take call. And then the other model is when there's maybe 10 or 12 OB providers in the community, and so a physician is taking call once every 10 to 12 days, and that's desirable. And so in a community like Sharon, where the N of our deliveries is smaller than 100 per provider, it's difficult to make it economically sustainable for a provider to choose our community, even though it's an amazing place to live. It's a hard place to make a living because of the small number of deliveries that we have. It's also hard to be on call 30% of your life, right? Because you're on call for 24-hour periods, and that's hard. So even though we might not have a delivery, you're still on call and have to be available 24 hours a day during that 1 in 3 that you're on call. So it takes a very special kind of person to make that lifestyle choice, to come to do that. We get to live in a beautiful community, and that's a wonderful trade-off. But there are some logistics that make it hard for a provider to make that sort of choice. So we're in the process of exploring how we can make it more appealing for a provider to make that choice. The other thing that happens is normally you would be able to recruit new people coming out of practice, and new people coming out of practice tend to like to join. And Mark, you and any of the physicians in the audience can correct me if I get any of this wrong, but they like to join practices where they're working with very closely with people who are very experienced because they're new doctors, right? They also like to work in places where they know that they will have a very secure income for a very long time, because often they're leaving medical education with huge debt, and so they're looking for places that they know that they're going to have a volume of work that will support their own personal economics that they find where they find themselves after being in medical education for upwards of 10 or 12 years. So, those are the major components, but we actually are very actively working on it. We want this to work out, but it is very, very fragile, and honestly, we're working on it every week. Maybe not every single day, but every single week we are working on it. Mark,
one final aspect of that is, other than the economic security, they're looking for the security of skill and quality care. They want to maintain their skills, and they want to actually improve themselves. And so they want a place usually of high volume and variety. And that's been our issue. We've had an issue with offering young people that type of environment. So that's one of the challenges that we've run into here.
Thank you so much. As part of Safe Sharon Hospital, we really appreciate all that you have done looking for a long-term solution. But I'm also concerned about what would happen if there was a short-term problem, or if suddenly one of the physicians had to leave for whatever reason. Would maternity be able to stay open? So are you guys open to something like hiring locum tenens physicians for a short term?
So the answer to that is, if it was very short term, we can go ahead and make those kinds of decisions. It depends on, one, whether or not you can get them. It actually can be very difficult to get locums. The second question, with all due respect to physicians who practice locums work, it's often very difficult to make sure that you're getting the quality of care that you want when you're hiring sort of locums for anybody who's in the room. Somebody asked, could we talk, lay, kind of not healthcare talk. So locums actually means temporary, part-time help, somebody who would come here from somewhere else and would stay here for 24 hours to take care of anybody who happened to walk in during that particular time and need to be delivered. So it's not somebody who would normally is here to cover a whole maternity or pregnancy. So that's like, it's per diem, temporary help to cover a shift, if you will. That's generally what locums is. Sometimes you can hire locums providers for like 6 months or something like that. But there is, as having had to use locums services before for one thing or another, they don't work out as often or more often as they do work out. Looking at Mark has been my experience. It's very unusual for us to have to ask a physician not to stay, who's a permanent physician, because we do a lot of work to make sure we recruit the right people and they're good fits for our organizations. It's not uncommon to have to ask a locums person to not stay or tell the company that you don't want that person to stay for one reason or another. So locums is not my first choice, although if we had to look at it, it's one of those things that we would look at. One of the things that's hard to talk about, but it's something I do need to talk about, is in agreement. One of the things it talks about is being commercially reasonable. We do need to make sure that whatever we're doing is commercially reasonable. I'm positive I could find somebody to come for $20,000 a day, right? But it's not commercially reasonable. So there are some constraints that we have to live within, because I need to be responsible. I need to be appropriate and responsible steward of scarce resources. So we are absolutely willing to invest in OB. We're actively investing in OB right now, and we are exploring other opportunities to do so. But yes, if something was to happen tomorrow, somebody got sick, suddenly tomorrow and said, I have to suddenly withdraw from the schedule, we would, our first ask would be to ask our 2 remaining doctors, would you be willing to do 1 and 2? That's what they do now when somebody goes on vacation. And so we would say, would you be willing to do 1 and 2 until such a time as we figure out what the next best thing is to do. But it isn't there isn't a 1-800 call a doc and you can get them that easily. It's tough. So it is something that we're worried about too. And we have some ideas and some thoughts that we're actively working on, but it's premature to share what they would be in this group, and some of the information is confidential with respect to the relationships with the physicians we're working with. So we're not at liberty to disclose those, but we are working very closely with Sharon to try to find solutions.
Are there restrictions against using nurse midwives within the program in a creative way?
Yes, there are requirements around what the practice is, what a practice of a nurse, advanced practice nurse would be. They are able to work. They do require a supervising relationship with a qualified physician. And again, to Dr. Herko's point, one of the things often that, even the 5 doctors that we recruit, that we have successfully recruited, Denise comes to us from Northern Dutchess Hospital and say, we want you to go to Northern Dutchess Hospital, it's a wonderful hospital, or we would like you to go to Sharon. And they sometimes they want to go to the hospitals that have NICUs and do the high-risk OB, because that's what they're interested in professionally. So again, it is a very specialized kind of person who is wanting to come work in a community that is a low-density population for OB. But yes, there are things that we have explored and are exploring with nurse practitioners. But the problems are not particularly different than trying to recruit obstetricians, and you also must have a supervising physician. They also cannot do emergency C-sections, and so you must have a physician on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to do an emergency C-section. So it doesn't change the call burden for a physician. So we are going down a lot of roads to try to reduce the burden that an obstetrician would feel coming to the community and things like that, but it's challenging because you still have to have a 24/7 physician coverage. Yes.
Good.
And I guess this is a question for both you, Carrie and understand Scott. I thought I heard Scott say in his enumeration of the conditions that at least through 2020, New Vance has to be committed to having at least 2 full-time OB/GYNs. And I didn't see that. I thought all the conditions were 5 years. And I know you're working very hard, but maybe I misunderstood that. So kind of a sense, it's fragile.
We'll read it to you because there are more words than.
Well, no. I don't need to have the actual thing read to me about commercially reasonable and what the community.
So there are the words, and I won't get exactly what you have in front of you, but the words are that we need to make a, I don't remember, a very reasonable effort to find a commercially reasonable solution to be able to provide 2 OB providers. And so I feel like that's what we're doing here, there's a difference between a reasonable effort. Because I don't have, I actually do have a magic wand in my office. So I was going to say I don't have a magic wand, but I do. But it doesn't work for everything that I want it to work. So if there was, to Ms. Moore's comment, if 2 of the physicians tomorrow said, effective Friday, I'm not going to come to your hospital anymore and do deliveries, I would have a hard time, even with a very concerted, incredible effort, to find to be able to find somebody for Friday, right? So we're making every effort that we can. I think that we are, like I said, there are a disproportionate amount of time and resources that are appropriate. I'm not saying it's inappropriate, but they are a very significant amount of time being spent on how to find a solution for OB in this community. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But Scott, can I ask you, because you said you were doing a lot of work to facilitate communication and you wanted what OHS is asking for to be very clear, and I thought I did hear you say that as through 2020, they would have to at least be 2 full-time OB/GYNs.
Are you asking about the time frame?
Well, I'm just asking about that.
Yeah. So, and I'm not sure if I understand the question, but if you're asking, yeah, it's by 2020. So it's not just for 2020. It implies by 2020. So and onward. So it doesn't specify that it's for. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So
okay.
So then the other language about commercially reasonable and even the need also part of that. So it's
right.
not an ironclad. It doesn't matter if you have to spend $20,000 a day.
That's correct.
It doesn't really matter.
Because it says, that's right. It has that language.
Okay, everyone, we're at 10 after 6, so this is going to be our last question right here.
I'm Kathleen Friedman from Sharon. I have 2 related questions. The first is, I'm wondering what prompted the rural hospital designation for Sharon Hospital in October. And secondly, if the service lines that Carrie Eaton was describing, run through all the hospital affiliates, does that alter the meaning of the rural hospital designation? Because many rural hospitals obviously sit in isolation in some place out in the Midwest or in the West, and they are not part of, a New Vance sort of system.
So there are federal designations for sole community hospitals and for rural designation that meet certain definitions. And the reason hospitals and health systems may generally pursue that recognition from the federal government or the state government usually in order to receive financial support and grants to help achieve long-term sustainability of the healthcare system. So the reason for any acquiring those levels of status would be for to create long-term sustainability for the hospital. That's why they exist. Those designations exist because hospitals that meet the definition for those criteria and generally are economically strained hospitals because the population doesn't always support the financial needs of the hospital, so that's why they exist.
So you guys applied for that?
So do you want to explain?
You guys applied for that?
I wouldn't say you guys. I honestly don't know. I think is Tristan in the room? misdemeanor. What I heard from was that when regional care left, they applied somehow, some way, did something, and that triggered, I guess, a review for us. And lo and behold, we just got notified October 1st, here we are. So I do think it was something that regional care did on their way out that prompted this. But I can't speak for the federal government. I really can't.
What can we find out? Is it written up somewhere?
No, I'll double check with, we can try to get that answer and get that out. I'll send it out to you all on your email. Yeah.
We can research it and get information for you, but what I can tell you is in general, not here, but in another healthcare system, like we wanted to have that because it helped the community and it helped the hospital. So it's, you know, unless something has dramatically changed since the last time I was part of an application for that, it would be something that benefited all of us. So
that should help with the OB/GYN situation.
Let us get the details.
Those are isolated rural hospitals where they can't get the numbers, but they still have to have some.
So I would be getting the facts personally before I would commit to the fact that it was specifically OB. So it depends on what the status of that is. On your service line question, really rural designation and service lines are completely non-related subject matter.
Okay, everyone. Thank you very much.